Right, all right, all right. You are now rocking with the best, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting, exhilarating episode of the Catch This Fade podcast. We are continuing our off-season series, which is at least a month too early to begin with. The Cowboys bowed out in the wild card round, so we have to get started a little bit early in figuring out what went wrong and what we're going to do to fix it moving forward in the future. And along those lines, I am very honored to have the one, the only Mr. John Owning of Pro Football Focus, Cowboys statistical savant. Actually, John is really a trenches guy. He is very big on the X's and O's and technique, and really that's what his forte is, which is pretty much why PFF grabbed him to try to give some sensibility to the numbers that they put out every year. So, John, thank you so much for joining us on this episode, man.
Hey, man, really excited that you started this back up, because there's one thing that's missing from the Cowboys content creation. It's more KD. That's for damn sure.
Hey, man, I appreciate that. It's actually been a long time since we talked. I think the last time we did a pod together was when we drafted Byron Jones. So that's like 8 years ago, man. It's been a while since we got to chop it up.
That was when we did like the big draft team, right? With like Landon and Toby and everything. That was fun.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's been a while, man. So obviously things did not go as planned when it came to the Cowboys postseason. We expected them, 12-5, second seed, tied for the best record in the NFC. Everybody anticipated that this was going to be a year they could at least get to the championship game, right? It was laid out for them, 2 home games guaranteed, and then they got blown up by Green Bay. From that came a lot of conversation of whether or not Jerry Jones was going to keep Mike McCarthy. I know where I landed on it. What were your thoughts, and what are your thoughts now that we know that McCarthy is coming back for year 5?
I feel like most of the fan base, I was leaning toward him not returning, firing him, and going another direction, just because when you do the same thing over and over again and expect something different to happen, that's kind of tough in my opinion. But there are good things that he did and good things that he can continue to build on. I think one thing that he doesn't get enough credit for is how his ability to adapt the scheme. And we saw that coming out of the bye week this week. I mean, the offense looks totally different coming out of the bye than it did before the bye. And that's largely on Mike McCarthy's shoulders as the architect of the offense, the ability to incorporate more motion, incorporate more condensed formations, more bunch, using more non-static looks, not relying on 2x2 formations the entire time, going more 3x1. They even use a lot of what are called load formations, where you get 4 eligible receivers to one side. And that's the kind of thing that I really like, and the kind of thing that you see a lot of the best offenses in the NFL leveraging consistently on a week-by-week basis. Now, the problem was that since he had to kind of switch up his offense mid-season, a lot of the motion, the new formations, they're not baked into the fundamentals of the defense or the offense.
Right.
So we got kind of to the upper limits of what they could do. You could see that while their motion at the snap rate and all that stuff went up post the bye week, it didn't get to the levels that we saw the best offenses in the NFL do. And that's because it's not baked into what they do from a fundamental perspective. That's the kind of thing you have to incorporate, in the OTAs and training camp and stuff. So I think if he goes to baking those into the fundamentals now, using more motion at the snap, creating leverage, creating conflict at the second level of defenders, the things that you see opposing offensive coordinators doing to the Cowboys defense consistently and having the most success. I think that is where you can see the Cowboys offense. It's going to be hard for them to get overall more success than they had this season, because they were one of the top offenses, but I think you'll see sustained success against the top defenses much better if he does incorporate those moving forward.
Yeah, and to me, that's the biggest question, right? Because we know what we would have loved to have seen. If they moved on from McCarthy, we wanted, most of us, I should say, we weren't really on board with the Bill Belichick. Obviously, Bill Belichick could have brought the mental toughness, and that's where people were pointing to the biggest issues. To me, it's not a physical toughness thing. The Cowboys are a tough team as far as, man-to-man, but as far as being able to maintain your head, think on the fly when things are flying at you in the biggest moments, that's my biggest gripe. But if we were to go in another direction with McCarthy, to me, it would have been Bobby Slowick. It would have been Ben Johnson or Frank Smith out of Miami. Like Frank Smith, what he did with motion, obviously Tyreek Hill is a unicorn in what he does, so clearly you want him on the move at all times. But if they had gone to one of those coordinators as a guy, that was really what I was looking forward to. I don't necessarily agree with everybody that Mike McCarthy's offense is outdated. I think, as you said, he was able to adjust on the fly this season. But even with that, we saw their motion at the snap rates. Even with the improvement that they made after the bye week, they were still in the bottom third of the league when it came to motion at the snap. And that was with the increase that we didn't see in the first 5 weeks. So I would love to see that happen in the offseason. My concern is not about the scheme, because the Cowboys have deployed many schemes and been the number one scoring offense more times than not. If Dak Prescott is your quarterback, you're going to score. That's just what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. My issue is more what he said after the San Francisco loss last year and what we saw in this game. He admitted that they came out nervous in that wild card game against San Francisco. And I don't know any other way to explain what happened this past Sunday than to say that they felt the nerves, they felt the gravity of the situation. They've gotten into big games. It's not like they've never performed well in big games, but in these big games, the Buffalo game, this game, the San Francisco game in week 5, they clearly weren't up to the challenge mentally to be able to execute whatever game plan they had put forward. That's my biggest gripe in Mike McCarthy returning, is that in those big games, I think confidence is inspired from the top down. It's one of those things where the executive level matters. If you can't inspire confidence that you're able to go out there and perform at your best, then you need a new leader. And that's pretty much what was the deciding factor for me. But when it comes to the scheme and all the things that you're saying, I think that they are absolutely going to go in the offseason and make those changes and bring those types of things that we're seeing out of these other offenses. I think we're going to see more of that next year. I just don't know whether or not it's going to matter when it comes down to the playoffs. That's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I love the way that you said that the executive level, they bring the confidence from top down of the organization. And I agree. That's where Mike McCarthy lacks. And is it an area that he can improve? Isn't it an area that you can bring somebody from the outside in, add him to the coaching staff that can help him in that area, or that can help instill that confidence? It's something that us on the outside, it's hard for us to really know. It's hard for us to really judge. And it's going to be one of those things that we'll kind of just know it when we see it. If we're in this position against next year and we see them play better, then it's going to be like, okay, they did make some of the changes that we were looking for, but that are not easy to see from the outside eye.
Yeah. Let's flip the script and talk about the defense, because it's something that me and you kind of got dragged back into the conversation recently on Twitter. And we don't mind, because, we're here for debate. All of us content creators, writers, video people, we're all in the same bucket, right? We're on the outside looking in. We don't have privy to the information inside. So we're all left to our own devices to try to decipher what we're seeing on the field. We ended up on the same side of this conversation when it came to the Cowboys and their approach to stopping the run. I've always said for the last 5+ years, linebackers don't matter. And it's not that linebackers don't matter. I don't believe in putting in a lot of stock into linebackers when it comes to stopping the run, because to me, the run game is kind of inconsequential when it comes to things. There are situations where the run game can exploit you, and we saw that in the Buffalo game. By far, the run defense was a reason that they lost to Buffalo. But when people point out that's why they lost to San Francisco earlier in the year, I'm like, wait a minute. They shut down McCaffrey. It was Brock Purdy that did them in that game. In this game, we kind of had the same conversation, right? People are pointing to what Aaron Jones did with all the touchdowns and the yardage, but they shut him down in the first half. It was 2.1 yards a carry in the first half, and they were down 27-0, right? So from my perspective, I'm not an X's and O's guy. I'm not a evaluate the talent guy at the level that you are. Can you share with us what your thoughts are on what the Cowboys have done to stop the run, on whether or not it needs to be as big of a focus? And then we can talk about how they deploy Micah and, the personnel that they have on the team.
Yeah, I think a lot of the biggest issues stem from, to me, and it has since, dating back to the days where they're getting beat by Sean McVay in the Rams game when they were running all over them in the playoffs, is the interior defensive line. Their ability to keep the linebackers clean, their ability to hold the ground at the point of attack. And a key thing that people don't notice is, even though a defensive tackle, when he's not getting double teamed, he has to shed blocks and make plays, because if he's not getting double teamed, that means the other offensive linemen adjacent to him are climbing to the second level to get on the linebackers. And when you have smaller-ish linebackers like the Cowboys have in Clark and Bell, they're not going to get off those blocks. And if they do get off those blocks, it's going to be too late. It's going to take them too long, So I think if you saw them, that's the thing that was so frustrating about this year is, like, they draft Mozzie Smith in the first round, and you're and me personally, I was celebrating, like, finally they're investing the necessary resources into what I think is an underrated position from an overall team defense. Like, I think the interior defensive line is way more important than the second level linebackers because they make the life eat. They kind of determine what life's going to be like for those linebackers out there,
Right.
whether they're going to have to quick fire. The thing about, I have to kind of move back in from a big picture point of view. When you're a linebacker, you're a conflict defender. You're constantly in run and pass conflict on every single play. You have to discern whether it's a run or a pass, and that's going to determine whether you're going to take your drop or you're going to fire forward, whether you're going to fast flow to your gap or you're going to wait, hold, all that kind of things. And when you have an interior defensive line that can give you more time to make your decision, it's going to make life so much easier. And the Cowboys just don't have the consistency on the interior defensive line because, as we saw with Mozzie Smith, he went on the Atkins diet or whatever, was listed 320 plus, and now he's, some people said he's 297. Some people said he's 307. I heard Kyle Human say that on the draft show this week, that he was at more like 307, not 297. Whatever it is, he was way too dang small. And all you need to do is just take a screenshot of him and Jonathan Hankins together, and you can see how much smaller he is. And you can see it actualized on the play. He's getting moved off his gap. He's getting blown out of his gap. He's getting displaced, whether it's vertically or horizontally. And that's just something that ruins the entire scheme of the run defense. When the defensive tackle is not in the gap that they need to be, then your linebackers are going to have to make up for it. So by the alignment, say your linebacker is lined up in a 30 alignment, which is as where the 3 technique would be over the B gap. And you have a nose tackle in the A gap. If Mozzie gets blown out of the A gap into the B gap, then the linebacker is going to have to adjust. But now he's not flying forward. He's going to have to move laterally and then to go forward. And that takes time. And that's going to allow the linemen to get up in their level. And it's going to create these pathways to big gains. So if you saw the Cowboys, I hate to say it again because they just drafted a guy in the first round, but continually invest in the interior defensive line. We know Jonathan Hankins is getting kind of up there in age now.
Right.
He's been a 1-year player. If they can, find another guy in the draft or maybe go get like a Grover Stewart in free agency, that could do magical things for the Cowboys at the second level. And you will magically see the run defense get better, in my opinion, along with some scheme things you want to see. You want to see the Cowboys kind of use, I would say, I don't want them to load up the box because I still think pass is king. And the one good thing that the Cowboys did is when Trevon Diggs went down, they were playing the math game. So they were getting a lot of 3-over-2s on the outside, a lot of 4-over-3s, depending on what the formation the offense was doing. And I really like that idea. But then as we saw that guys like Baldy and other people have explained out of the Green Bay Packers game, there's just way too much open space in that front. They're using putting Mozzie Smith as a loose 3 technique, which is a 3 technique is on the outside shade of the guard, and a loose 3 technique is when they stick that out a little bit longer. So he's almost on the inside eye of the tackle. And when you have a guy like Mozzie Smith, that's just not something you should do because those adjacent gaps are going to get widened, and you're just making life more and more difficult on these undersized linebackers, expecting them to take on blocks and make plays. And that's just not something that's going to work. And that's one thing that I think Quinn deserves a lot of criticism of, is that he almost didn't pay enough attention to the run at times, and it kind of hurt his ability for his linebackers to play properly. He was kind of playing a scheme for the defense that he had at the beginning of the year, and he didn't adjust when the injuries hit to Leighton Vander Esch. When Big Hank was out, we saw how much that kind of compromised the run defense. I think his ability to adapt is kind of the opposite of what we saw from McCarthy. He didn't adapt enough in those situations, in my opinion.
PFF obviously is a grading website. That's one of the things that they do for the public, that the public gets to see. I know there's a whole nother level of the data that they give to the teams that the public never is even conscious about unless, we talk about it in these type of situations. They did not, the grading team, the analytical team, did not think that Hankins was all that great to begin with in stopping the run, right? So if he's your biggest run stuffer and he is, I would probably call it a little bit below average when it comes to run stuffing based on his grade. Molly Smith was nowhere to be found on the rankings for defensive tackles when it came to run.
Very bottom.
He was on page 2, right? So not good. So to me, when you have that situation where your DTs aren't doing that job, you can only ask Osa to do so much as a 3 technique, right? I think as a pass rusher, he's a splendid part of this defense, but he can only do so much when it comes to that sort of thing. If your DTs can't do their job, and then you have smaller linebackers, to me, there was no solution the Cowboys could have deployed in 2023 that was going to solve the issue, right? There was just nothing based on the personnel. LVE was having a really strong year before he went out. We don't know whether or not we're ever going to see LVE play again. Demarion Overshone, he looked very capable in what we saw. He blew out his ACL. We have no idea what's going to happen there because we saw what happened with Jabril Cox. He blew out his ACL, and though he returned to the team, he never regained that form that we hoped that he was going to have. So to me, it's like they had to start from ground zero in building up this run defense. And with the whole perspective of it still needs to kind of be secondary to the pass defense, right? Mm-hmm. But they still need to deploy better personnel. One of the things that we had people asking us about or, confronting us about was move Micah to the off-ball linebacker position. He was a linebacker at Penn State. This is how you could have solved the problem. It's not the ideal fix, but he's a really fast guy and he can go sideline to sideline. Before we get out of here, tell people why you feel that's not the best way that you could have used Micah, even knowing how bad everything was when it came to the run defense.
I mean, like I said before, the linebacker position in and of itself is a position in conflict, run-pass conflict all the time. Offenses are doing everything they can to make life extremely difficult on the second-level defenders, using motion, using pre- and post-snap movement to change up their run gaps. All of these different types of looks that you have to be prepared for from both a film and from a make quick decision standpoint. And the idea that you can take someone, even as talented as Micah Parsons, who in my opinion is the best defender in the NFL, the most versatile defender in the NFL. But the idea that he could just switch to linebacker and from a part-time basis and be able to provide you, top level run defense is just, and in coverage too, because that's the thing that people don't realize is if you're going to be playing him at linebacker, he's going to be spending snaps in coverage like we saw in the 3rd and 9 against the Packers.
Right.
And the idea that he's going to be able to do that competently is just, I think it's make-believe. Life is too hard on linebackers in today's NFL for someone to be able to just moonlight there and be effective. Now, what you can do is situations where you put him at linebacker, you give him one specific gap, you take the conflict out of it and you say, you're blitzing here. We're going to take you and you're going to go in the A gap. That's something that makes sense. But you can't do that every play because if you do, defenses are going to take advantage of the voids that create. You're taking one person out of coverage, putting them into the pass rush who normally wouldn't. So you're rushing 5, 6 players, and that's just going to make life more easy on opposing pass offenses to, like we saw, get the ball out quickly and then rely on the yak to make plays. And I just don't think that's feasible for a player. And when you have the best pass rusher in the entire world, you want the dude to be rushing the passer as much as humanly possible. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't know, don't know what everybody else thinks, but any game plan that takes them away from doing that on a notable basis, obviously 1 or 2 snaps here or there, that's something you can live with. But if you're doing it for more than a handful of snaps, taking him away, you're making your defense worse, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we saw that Micah, he lapped the field when it came to double team rate this year, right? So if Micah isn't consistently rushing the passer and you're taking him out of that, then not only that, but it's a trickle down effect because if they're not going to double team him as a linebacker, so now they're going to have extra offensive linemen, extra protectors that are going to be focusing on everybody else, and it's just
or even if they don't keep the extra blockers, then those are extra receivers that are getting into route immediately. The thing about Micah is, he basically gets chipped on 50% of his pass rushes, and people don't realize how valuable that is because that's one receiver that you don't have to worry about going downfield. If a tight end or a running back is chipping, they're going to be running a short to intermediate route. And that makes life so much easier on your deep coverage defenders because they don't have to worry about one more guy coming their way. They can say, okay, he's chipping, don't have to worry about him. Now I can focus on these other targets that are coming my way. Whereas if Micah's not there, now you got to worry about the tight end coming up the seam. You got to worry about a post route from the tight end. You know, you got to worry about all these different route combinations. It just adds one more, you know, potential combination that you have to worry about. And that's difficult.
It is. It is. Look, we're going to run out of time, or we've run out of time here on this episode, because we're kind of try to keep it short and sweet, because you know me, I can talk for hours at a time, and I can definitely talk ball with you for hours at a time. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and cut this episode, but we're going to regroup and talk again throughout the off season to kind of try to make this a regular thing so that we can keep the fans informed about what's going on with the Cowboys. We'll do some more analysis of what happened last year, some more spin forward to how the Cowboys are going to fix this thing. Hopefully, pray, knock on wood, they'll be able to get over the hump next year. But John, as always, it's a pleasure, my guy. Great to chop it up with you, man.
Yes, sir. Really appreciate it. Just send out the back signal and I'll be here.
My man, that's it. We're out of here. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in to another episode of Catch This Fade. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. You know where to find us. We're out of here.